Hi, good morning. I'm Carina with the Kendrick Law Group Family Division, and here with me today, I have the distinct pleasure and honor of introducing David Smith. David, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Karina. I'm very pleased to be here.
David is a Washington, D.C. based educator, career coach, and consultant. He teaches at the Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University and the School of Education at Drexel University. His career coaching focuses on individuals looking for careers in peace building, conflict resolution, international, educational, humanitarian, development, and related fields. He is an author, keynote speaker, and has written numerous op-eds for publications including the Baltimore Sun, Huffington Post, and New York Times. David, tell me a little bit about your work, if you don't mind. You've got such an impressive resume.
Thank you, Karina. I really appreciate that. I would call myself a peace building professional. And by that, I mean somebody who in many ways, in many different sectors, is really advocating for a broad peace building approach to doing things. So when I talk about peace building, I'm not only looking at what it goes on in the legal profession, that is, at advancing peacemaking and conflict resolution. I also work a lot in the international sector. I spent several years at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C., which is a federal think tank that focuses on international conflict resolution. And I also do community mediation. And I'm not so much doing family mediation is where I started, but I still do community mediation and working within communities to advance peace building. In addition to that, I am the president of a small not-for-profit called the Forge Center for Peacebuilding and Humanitarian Education that focuses on advancing experiential approaches, that experience-based approaches to training people in how to work in humanitarian contexts. And as you mentioned, I'm a career coach also. So I kind of got a spectrum of things that I do. And that's something you can do when you get to a certain age, I must say. Not everybody can say, well, I'm just going to do a little bit of everything, but I've been fortunate in that I can do that right now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you moved from lawyer to mediator, because that was something that we kind of share. I'm currently a family law attorney, just recently certified as a mediator myself. Let's talk a little bit about your journey from
Sure.
lawyer to mediator and why that happened.
So I started off a number of years ago as a young lawyer, graduating from a law school in Baltimore, and I was interested in family law. So what I focused on was custody, alimony, divorce. I did a lot of grandparent right work and so forth. And this was back in the late, kind of the middle 1990s when family mediation was just kind of getting its grounding. And one of the things that I recognize is that often as a lawyer, I wasn't doing the good work that I really wanted to do. I really wanted to work individually with people to help them work through conflict. Conflict is a natural phenomenon, recognized, but it's how we manage and deal with conflict. And to me, it wasn't a matter of one party winning over another party as much as getting the parties themselves to recognizing how they could come together. So in the 1990s, I was fortunate to find training not necessarily designed for lawyers at the time, in family mediation. And I took the training and I was just sold that this was a better approach to working with people going through conflict. I also experienced divorce in my own family. My parents had gone through divorce. And though I wouldn't say it was a kind of an aggressive divorce and it was a bad situation, it was still something that I always thought, would there be better approaches to doing it? So I started really, and there was some resistance back in the day. Lawyers were not so comfortable with what mediation was. We were used to litigating custody and everything. But soon I started to develop kind of a community of other mediators who were interested in the legal community called ADR, alternative dispute resolution work, and developing a mediation practice.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. In the state of Florida, there was a huge resistance to mediation when it was first on the scene. And what's interesting is that it's now a requirement for all litigated cases. They must attend mediation, sometimes more than one time. So, we know that divorce cases, the majority of them, and I think it's like 95% of cases, settle.
Mhm.
And so why not help folks get into a place where they're comfortable in making decisions that are best for their family, as opposed to the one size fits all approach that often is where they end up in court in front of a judge.
It's a difficult transition because I think we have a kind of a societal expectation that, and maybe it's media and maybe it's just the way we always think that if you're going through a divorce or a separation, it needs to be kind of that aggressive type of thing that people have to do. And there's this suspicion that one party is taking advantage of the other. And one of the challenges is that often people who are going through divorce and separation have not been able to have a frank conversation, maybe for a long period of time. It's amazing as a mediator when I would bring people in my office for the first time, and they hadn't talked in months, really. They hadn't had a conversation. So, if you can kind of get around the kind of the expectation of a conflict and of people getting at each other to get to a conversation, then mediation can be most effective in moving the parties forward.
I couldn't agree more. And I know that you didn't have an opportunity at that you weren't doing any collaborative cases at the time. And as you know, I'm collaboratively trained, and I'm really focusing on collaborative law process for my divorcing clients. That is exactly the same premise: is eliminating that place of conflict and focusing on the common grounds. And
Hmm.
not only that, but having a focus on the future and the hope of the possibilities, rather than what I think litigation does, which is a focus on the past.
Right.
And that's never really helpful for people. I can't tell you how many clients I've had that say, I feel stuck. And,
Yeah.
and I can't disagree with that sentiment when they're in the process of litigation. It is that stuck feeling. And when you get them away from there and help them look forward to the future, that's when some creative option building
Mhm.
can really take place. Let me ask you this, David. What role can lawyers play in the peacemaking process?
Well, one of the things is that first of all, for lawyers to help clients feel comfortable with the notion that they are not the conflict is natural. That is, they're not. This is like a lot of people would come, into a lawyer's office and say, "I can't believe my marriage fell apart," or "I'm in this kind of situation. I don't believe it would ever happen to me." And for lawyers to help people feel like this is kind of reality. People go through conflict. The key to conflict is not to do away with the conflict, but how to manage and deal with the conflict, how to transform a relationship. Often we talk about this idea of conflict resolution, resolving the conflict management, dealing with the conflict, in other words, being able to manage it, which actually is really important because if you've got young children and you go through a divorce and then you continue then over a period of time to continue to work with each other, you're managing it. To maybe transforming the relationship becomes really important so that you're dealing with each other in a different way. That really becomes really critical in all of this process, is kind of working towards that.
And those are really great points. I think sometimes lawyers get stuck in the law and
Yes.
being the expert in the law. And I just think that that's oftentimes misses the marks when you're dealing with these really, unique, complex, often
Yeah.
complex family law issues.
Right. Yeah, it's surprising, and sometimes this sounds a little trite, but it really isn't meant to be. Is that um, it's surprising how many people going through a divorce that just want an apology, that just want the other party to apologize for being not really a good spouse and doing some terrible things. Now, lawyers are concerned about that because that might be admitting liability and so forth, and guilt, and those things you have to work through. But I'm often in mediations where it isn't about I want X number of dollars in alimony, or I want custody, or I want this out of the house, as much as, can you just admit that this is what you did and it was hurtful? And if you can do that, mediation can be such a successful outcome, can really do some really great things.
I couldn't agree with you more. And part of that is that conversation about positional bargaining versus interest-based bargaining.
Right, right.
And it's not so much about the what, it's about the why. And those are really some interesting concepts about the apology. And a lot of times
Yeah,
you're 100% right. Sometimes people just want that apology. It's
yeah.
very powerful, and it can really shift the energy
Mhm.
and allow for that successful negotiation. So couldn't agree with you more on that. You shared that your focus is the broader notion of peace building. Peace
Mhm,
building. How
mhm.
does that relate to peacemaking?
So one of the things that I want people to think about is that the notion of working with individuals and dealing with conflict and at the conflict itself is really an important function of the work that we can be doing. We often call that peacemaking. And peacemaking is really bringing people to the table. So a mediator brings people to the table, an attorney can do that, a collaborative attorney can do that, bringing people to paper, having that conversation. So it's peacemaking, sometimes we call it conflict resolution. But there's a broader notion of peace building, and that is working in many different ways, working in environments and in sectors to alleviate suffering, to reduce violent conflict, to really build community at times. All of these things are things that are part of this peace building notion and things that mediators and lawyers can participate in. So if you think about using education or nonviolent approaches or doing things like, doing not-for-profit work to make a better society, all of these things are part of this broader notion of peace building, which I think is a way that we should be moving our work generally, of which peacemaking is one strategy of that. And there are many strategies that are part of that.
Well, we definitely could use a little bit more peace pretty much everywhere right now. Would
Right.
you agree? So, what advice, David, would you offer to those of us who are dealing with conflict in family situations?
Well, one of it to recognize that it's normal, even though you might feel like it's just you, it's very unique. The other thing to recognize is that there are strategies and approaches that you can use, which may be difficult to get a handle on in the beginning in order to work through the situation with the person that you're in conflict with. And that's why you seek professionals. And you should seek a professional earlier than later. Quite often what happens, I'm not trying to create a market for professionals, but dealing with conflict is an emotional, it's wrought with financial issues. And so seeking out someone early on, often before the conflict becomes difficult, more difficult is better. We can do some prevention, and mediators and collaborative lawyers can play a preventive role in doing that also, in getting ahead of it. Sometimes people say, well, I'll take care of it even though it's kind of messy. And you might be well intended to do that, but sometimes it's difficult. But the other thing I would remind people is that it will pass. One of the things that as a mediator and a collaborative attorney, I think people can do and work with clients is getting them to think about the future. You're kind of stuck in the present, and the present is overwhelming and overpowering. And to get people to step back and say, imagine yourself a year from now or 2 years from now, what will that look like? And it's if you can get people to think beyond what's going on, then they can manage what's going on at the present and get to that.
Yeah, and I think it's critical, and I try to deliver that hope to my clients as much as I can,
Sure.
because I think having them look forward to that 1 year, 5 year timeline really does help them get out of that being stuck feeling.
Yeah, it
Um,
gives them hope. Hope is really important. And I think sometimes you don't think lawyers are supposed to do that, but they are. They are to give hope to their clients. And collaborative lawyers and mediators in particularly, being agents of hope, that's really critical to the work that we should be doing.
that's my new title, Agent of Hope. I really like that, David. You've really just given so many of our viewers a lot of information to think about peace building and hope. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time to speak with me about these really important foundational things that lawyers should be doing for their clients and providing to their clients as we deal with family law issues.
My
Uh,
pleasure. My
Thank you
pleasure.
so much. David, if someone wants to get in touch with you
Sure.
to either be a keynote speaker or career coaching or any of the other many things that you provide on your services, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. The best way is to go to my website, which is David J. Smith, and just J, the letter J, davidjsmithconsulting.com. So davidjsmithconsulting.com, and go there, and then there's an ability to contact me through my website. That's the best way of doing it. So I look forward to working with anyone who's interested in these issues and assisting them.
Well, we could continue to talk all day, so we may have to get you down here to do a keynote speak as
Okay.
speech
Okay.
as well. But David, thank you again. I'm Carina Leeson with the Kendrick Law Group Family Division, and thank you all for watching today.